Some of the best lessons in life are sometimes short ones, quick and to the point. You probably have, and I know that I have, sat through different classes and courses over the length of any period of time. Sometimes we've sat through 6-week courses or 13-week courses. I can remember taking a 6-month course once. But for me, many of the greatest lessons that I've ever learned are lessons that were taught in one day. And sometimes they're lessons that are learned in one moment of time. Well, in today's scripture passage, Jesus shares 4 quick lessons out of Matthew 6. In Matthew 6:19, Jesus says, "The best treasures are heavenly ones." In verse 22, he teaches that what your eyes feast upon determines the light or the darkness in your soul. In 24, he says, you can have only one Lord, and if it's money, it surely can't be Jesus. And in 25, Jesus basically teaches, don't worry, be happy, because God is in control. Those are all lessons about life, and they can be taught in just a short moment or two of time. Let me suggest that you do something this afternoon. That you take those 4 lessons that Marilyn just read, and that you spend maybe 15 minutes studying each one of those. In other words, those are some of the best teachings that Jesus had to offer about living and walking your life with faith. And imagine what you could learn if you took time to reflect upon each of those for just 15 minutes. In 1 hour today, wow, you could learn a lot of stuff. Some of those talk about worry or stress. And some of the hardest lessons for me to learn are the ones about stress and worry. My family considers me to be the worrier in the family. I've been called the worrywart. I've been called the what-if person in the family. What if this happens? What if that happens? And I must say, I get it honestly. It's Mother's Day, and I get it from my mother. My mother was the worrier in our family, and one of us kids had to accept that trait. So I guess I'm the one who picked it up. Okay. Let me give you an example of what I mean. The first time that Peggy and I traveled to Alaska, we got off the plane, and I realized that we were 5,000 miles away from this church. And I started to worry. The whole week we were there, I worried about church stuff. Because we were so far away from you all. What if you needed us? And then that was the same trip where I fell and I broke my shoulder and my 3 ribs, and then the worry got even worse. I wasn't worried so much about the healing. I was worried, oh my gosh, now I may be gone for another month. Will the church even be able to survive without me there? Like you hadn't been doing it for 125 years. Well, I decided after that things would be different. I told myself that from then on, anytime I go on a vacation, I'm not going to worry about the church. I'm going to leave it there in the office. I'm going to when I walk out of the office on vacation, I'm just going to leave the worries there. If problems arrive at the church, I'm just going to let the rest of the staff handle them. I will pick them up when I get back. Well, that only kind of worked. Because, you get back and you pick up this huge burden of stuff, and you just started, when you're on vacation, you're worried about the burden you're going to have to pick up when you get back. Yeah. So I have been known to be a worrier, and apparently people have noticed that. Any of you noticed that? No. I'll tell you, one of the traits of micromanagers, and people on the staff have called me a micromanager, and that is probably because we worry, and therefore we have to micromanage this stuff to be sure that everything's taken care of. Well, I received an email a while back from a church member who felt perhaps I needed some lessons in worry. And it was an email, it was a little lesson email entitled, What You Can Learn from a Glass of Water. So today I decided since I had a bottle of water up here, let's say, what you can learn about a bottle of water. How heavy is a bottle of water was the question that was asked. So how heavy is a bottle of water? 8 ounces. 8 ounces? Okay. 16 ounces? Okay. This one says 16.9 fluid ounces. 1 pint, 9 ounces. Okay. So there it is. So on the one hand, yes, you could say it's 16.9 ounces. But on the other hand, doesn't it depend on how long I hold it? For example, right now it feels like it's 16 ounces. If I continue to hold this during the entire sermon, it may feel like it weighs a couple of pounds, right? And if I decide to continue to hold this until lunchtime, it's going to really weigh heavy upon me. And if Peggy kind of forces me to carry this around all afternoon until supper time, by supper time, this is going to feel like a ton. So it's not just about how much is in there. It's also about how long you hold it. And the lesson in the email about stress was this. The same is true with stress. Stress weighs more heavily upon you the longer you choose to carry the stress. Think about that. So, what I'd like to do today is to share with you 6 stress reducers that came along with that email about how heavy does a bottle of water weigh. So, these 6 stress reducers are pretty biblical. I've added the biblical part to this more secular teaching. So let's go ahead and get started. Stress reducer number 1. Okay? Stress reducer number 1. Accept the fact that on some days you are the pigeon and some days you're the statue. Okay? In other words, sometimes life is going to give you lemonade, and on other days, people are going to be throwing lemons at you. We just have that happen to us, and maybe the best lesson we can learn is to just deal with it and to accept it. Because how many times, think about this, how many times have you been dumped on by somebody else, but in the long run, it really didn't matter? But because we have those statue days, we tend to be people who find ourselves stressed out by the junk that's thrown at us. My daughter, a number of years ago, gave me a Father's Day present, and it was a coffee mug. And on the one side of the, remember, I'm the family worrier, and she knows it because I worry more about her than the rest of the family combined. So anyway, Carrie gives me this coffee mug, and on the one side it says, "Don't sweat the small stuff." Okay. And on the other side it says, "And Dad, it's all small stuff." And how true that is if you think about it. Worry about, or why be stressed about, or why make a big deal about what's going on today if it's really not going to matter a week from now? So often we add stress to our lives because we overreact to the troubles that come our way. Rather than overreacting, let me suggest that you get a grip. And what I mean by that is get a grip onto Jesus and let Him help you handle your problems. Jesus says this in John 16. He says, "In this life you are going to have trouble." How about if right now we call those pigeon moments? Okay. So Jesus says, in this life you are going to have trouble, and I'm going to paraphrase Jesus, and He says this, "But take heart, for I can overcome pigeons." Yeah. Stress reducer number 2. Always keep your words soft and sweet, just in case you have to eat them. You need to remember these, folks. These are good. These are good. All right. How often have we added stress to our lives because we have uttered bitter words to or about other people? Now, those of you who like Facebook and maybe you're on Twitter, understand that you have now entered into a world where it is very easy to slam or talk negative about one of your friends or a coworker. And when that happens, many times you need to eat the words that you've written. Have you ever heard the old wise saying, if you can't say something nice about somebody, don't say it at all? Well, that's really good advice. And Jesus says it this way in Matthew 15. What defiles you or ruins you is what comes out of your mouth. Wow. So often we have poisoned or spoiled relationships because of how we have talked about others. Did you know that your tongue is the strongest muscle in your body? Therefore, be careful how you use it. Stress reducer number 3. Always read stuff that will make you look good if you die in the middle of it. That's pretty neat. Because living a false life is stressful. Who you really are is how you act when you think nobody else is watching. Become the person you want others to believe you already are. And that will reduce the stress in your life. Try this. Imagine if Jesus were to come to your home or your place of work and start rummaging through your reading material, or more so, dig a little deep into your computer. Will he find some stuff there that might embarrass you? Let me give you an illustration of what I mean by that. Churches tend to loan out equipment. You know, we'll loan out tables and chairs. And sometimes we'll loan out even some of our electronic equipment, such as our video projectors or our DVD players. Well, many years ago, let me say it this way, many years ago, which tells you it was many years ago, I loaned out a VCR. Do you remember those things? Yeah. You know, Walmart hasn't sold them for 10 years. So you know that this story isn't about anybody in this church, okay? But anyway, many years ago, I loaned out a VCR to a church member. And I got it back about 3 or 4 weeks later, and this person had forgot to take their X-rated videotape out of the machine. Now, not only was he embarrassed before God, but he was embarrassed before his pastor. Jesus says this in John 6. Take into your body the words and images that give spirit and life. And the Apostle Peter says this. Seek after the words that give eternal life. That leads to stress reducer number 4. Okay? Never put both feet in your mouth at the same time, because then you won't have a leg to stand on. How many of you here have been there and done that? Yeah. You put your foot in your mouth. Now, some people may not know what that phrase means. To put your foot in your mouth means that you have said something embarrassing or out of place or inappropriate. Yeah. And other people have now felt uncomfortable because of what you have said, and it makes you look like an idiot. Yeah. Yeah. How often have you put your own foot in your mouth? And what can you do to avoid foot-in-mouth disease? How about if you engage your mind before you open your mouth? Pretty simple thing to do. Jesus warns in Matthew 22 that your words will either acquit you or they will condemn you. That's a pretty powerful thing, isn't it? Yeah. So one way to lower your stress levels is to think before you speak. Here's stress reducer number 5, my favorite. Never forget this truism. The second mouse always gets the cheese. Think about it. Think about it, okay? One of the greatest stresses in our life is the desire to be number one, to be first, to get ahead of everybody else, to be top dog. Which is why I love this illustration about the mouse. The first mouse to get to the mousetrap usually gets its neck broke. Then the second mouse can more easily retrieve the cheese. You know, you don't always need to be number one to win. You don't always need to have the best or the biggest in the neighborhood. You don't always need to impress the client. Sometimes just enjoy being second and applauding the other guy. You don't always have to be king of the mountain. You can be the servant instead. And if you remember, Jesus rewards people who are like that. Remember how Jesus said, the first shall be last and the last shall be first someday? Well, that is a great way to walk the walk of faith. Stress reducer number 6. A truly happy person is one who can enjoy the scenery on a detour. When things don't go our way, a common response is stress. We have programmed ourselves to let stress be an almost automatic response to the detours of life. As stress builds, so does our frustration and our anger. For example, road rage flares when we are detoured in life by maybe real traffic jams or someone's bad driving or maybe just a real detour. To end that type of stress, it would probably be helpful if we followed a teaching of Jesus. And Jesus says this: life itself is going to hate you, exclude you, mock you, and curse you. When that happens, be happy anyway and leap for joy, because your real reward is all about heaven. Each of these 6 lessons basically says that Jesus is the answer. Change your focus from your problems to Him, and your world will be much less stressful. Choose the things of Christ over the things of this world, and that will do you a world of good. One last story about vacations that Peggy and I take. We took a vacation a couple of years ago, I think just 2 summers ago, and I had left church so stressed that I came upon a little sign in an old country store, and I just had to buy the sign. And the sign said, if it weren't for stress, I'd have no energy at all. And I liked that, so I bought that, and I brought that home, and I put that on the mantelpiece over the fire. Peggy did not like that, and she let me know it. Yeah. So a couple of months later, she just quietly bought another little sign, and she put it in front of my sign. And it simply read this: stress less, pray more. Isn't that great advice? Guess at the yard sale, Philip, I sold the one that said, I got rid of that one. We've only got stress less, pray more now sitting at home. That is such good advice. And therefore, let me suggest this, that we take these lessons from Matthew 6 home with us and reflect upon those and allow those to become who we are as we walk more as people of faith than as people of worry. Let's bow for a prayer.